page 70, and 4 lines from the bottom of the page. We last spoke about a concept called Machshava Tova HaKadosh Baruch Hu Metzorfa L'Maaseh. A good thought, Hashem links that thought to action. And we discovered that most people understand that to mean that, don't worry, as long as you have good intentions, Hashem will consider it as if you did it, which is not what that means. Good intentions are good intentions, but good intentions are not actions. And ultimately, as the phrase goes from the sages, Hamaiseh hu ha'ikar. The most important thing is what you do. You can talk as much as you want. You can intend as much as you want. You could meditate as much as you want. At the end of the day, it is action that counts. So what does it mean that machshava tova HaKadosh Baruch Hu Metzorfa L'Maaseh, that a good thought, Hashem links it to action? So this chapter explained what that is. Because we said, ideally, the ultimate is that a person should have such a profound, developed awareness of Hashem and contemplation on Hashem's greatness that you actually feel it. You actually feel that love for Hashem. You feel the pulsating energy of the emotion that a person is supposed to have towards Hashem. And that would be the ideal version, not just of an ordinary person, it would be the ideal version of a Beinoni. However, not everybody gets there. Not everybody has the capacity for this very developed, focused, contemplative state. For some of us, we're a little bit ADD. So what's the alternative? So we've been talking about something called tuvuna, not to be confused with bina. Bina is a very elaborate, developed intellectual appreciation of a concept. Tuvuna, as we're learning it in this chapter, is an intellectual acknowledgement of a concept. Now, there's a big difference. Intellectual, I get it, I acknowledge, I know that this is an important thing. Even if I don't fully understand it, even if I don't fully comprehend it, I acknowledge that this is an important thing, and therefore I'm going to behave that way. So this is the person who spends some time thinking about the greatness of Hashem, about the nature of their soul, and about how it is that Torah mitzvahs creates the bond between us in our conscious human state and with Hashem, and therefore tvuna, it clicks. I get it, that the most valuable and important thing I need to do in my life is serve Hashem. Then Hashem takes that machshava tova, he takes that good thought, metzorfa l'maaseh, when you actually do something driven by that healthy thought, Hashem links the thought to the action to give the action greater value, which is what we're going to be speaking about this evening. Because we haven't yet really unpacked what the greater value is. We've spoken about the idea, Kadosh Baruch Hu Metzorfa L'Maaseh, that Hashem links your motivation, your thought process, your tevuna, your acknowledgement, your awareness of Hashem into your action, gives your action greater value. We haven't discussed what that greater value is. Now, by way of introduction, before we actually unpack what the Alter Rebbe is going to tell us in this chapter, or in the latter part of this chapter, the last part of this chapter, so before we actually get there, we need to just have a little bit of a map and a little bit of a direction on the map. What do I mean by that? So, we'll start very simply. Would you say that we currently, in our current form as human beings, live in a physical or a spiritual environment? Physical. Okay, not a hard question to answer. Physical environment. Where would there be a spiritual environment that beings could live in? Not necessarily us, because we're humans, and humans live in a physical environment. So where would you find a spiritual environment in which spiritual beings could live?
Next world.
Next world. In the next world. And whether it's right or wrong, we'd typically go
Up, yeah.
right? Because we mean that it's a reality that is above our reality, not physically above our reality. You're not going to launch a rocket and find these spiritual worlds. It means that it's at a higher reality to our reality. Now the question is, what makes a reality higher or lower? So I know what you're going to say. Physical is lower and spiritual is higher. That doesn't help. And one of the reasons it doesn't help is because the average person doesn't even know what spiritual is. Ask people, describe to me or define for me what spiritual is. What are people going to say? What do you think is the most common response people give if you ask them to explain what spiritual is?
God-fearing.
Okay, God-fearing. Not the most common, but I'll take it. What do you think the most common response is? Not physical.
Connecting to your higher
Not
self?
physical. The
Not
most
physical.
common response, you ask what's spiritual, people say not physical. That does not help me. That's the equivalent of you going into a grocery store and you're trying to look for a particular product. So you ask somebody who works in the store and you say, where can I find the peanut butter? And they say, not here. Okay, so I know I'm in the wrong aisle. How does that help me? If we don't know what something is, then the very best that we can come up with is tell people what it's not. I don't know what spiritual is. I know what it's not. It's not tangible. It's not visible.
Like what is air?
Okay, air, you could tell it. Put it under a microscope. You can tell what it is. It doesn't matter if you can't touch it. Put it under a microscope. You can see the elements. You can see the molecules that make up air. Try to do that with spirituality.
Can't define it.
Can't do it, right? So we don't know what spiritual is. So let's say this. For the purposes of our conversation, we're going to tweak the conversation slightly. Say this is not just a matter of physical versus spiritual, because believe it or not, there is spirituality in the physical world as well, which are the intangibles. There are things that people could say are spiritual things. Very often when a person tells you, I'm a very spiritual person, I get tickled when people say, I'm a very spiritual person, because I don't know what they mean, and I'm not sure that they know what they mean.
Do yoga.
Right? Exactly.
What's that?
Exactly. I do yoga. Exactly.
yoga.
What does it mean I'm very spiritual? I have an intuition. I understand people. I see auras. I don't know what it is. People have all these different concepts of what being spiritual is. It's intangible. Spiritual is intangible. Not all spiritual is healthy. Just because it's intangible, just because it's not physical, does not automatically make it something valuable. Let's say, for argument's sake, I'm going to throw out a term I don't want to get caught up in the term. I'm just going to throw out the term for the purpose of this conversation. If there's a bad energy in a place, that is a spiritual thing. It's not healthy. It's not elevated. It's not, right?
When a person meditates,
Yes,
that's when, if you meditate strong enough,
yes.
that is a spiritual experience.
How do you know?
Because you're not in your physical state.
Yes, you are. Of course you are.
Yes.
Meditation is 100% physical experience. What is the goal of meditation? The goal of meditation, dreaming is a physical experience. What is the goal of meditation? The goal of meditation is to get you into a very relaxed state of being that will allow, correct, which is all physical. You can measure it, you can give the person an EEG, you can see what kind of brain activity there is. It's a physical state. A dream is a physical experience. How do I know? Because it's the brain processing things through imagery, which is physical. It's not tangible in the classical sense, but it's a physical experience. So we don't quite know what spiritual is. And again, the purpose of the conversation over here is not to get into the definition of spiritual, other than to say this. What is higher is not necessarily more spiritual. We're going to use different language. We're going to say what is higher is more aware. Higher beings are more sentient. More primitive beings are less so.
Less what?
Sentient. Less
Sentient.
conscious.
Conscience.
Right? In other words, I don't know if you've ever done this, but if you watch ants, you wonder what's going through their minds.
Do they have mind?
You know, is it just who was it? Pixar who made them into a whole thing, with that there's this whole world going on over there? Or are they just simply automatons? They just go, they do their thing, they carry 6 times their body weight or whatever they think. Back, forth, back, forth, back, forth, back. No ant ever stops and thinks, what if we did this differently? So higher means greater awareness. Lower means lesser awareness. A clod of earth is something that we would not consider spiritual. We'd consider it to be lowly. Why? It has no awareness. There's absolutely no awareness. That doesn't mean it has no power. Earth has tremendous power. It has the power to regenerate, to generate growth. Put a seed into the earth and it will grow. There's no awareness. A human has awareness. Within the human experience, the people have higher awareness. The higher type of awareness that we're looking at is awareness of things that are beyond the here and now, things that are beyond the physical, that are beyond the conceptual. The greater awareness, and this is specific to our conversation, the greater awareness of Hashem that you have, the higher you are. So if I speak about a so-called spiritual being, and typically when people say spiritual beings, they typically are speaking about angels because we don't have vocabulary for other kinds of spiritual beings, and I say that the angels are up there in heaven, what I really mean is that the angels are in a state of far greater awareness of Hashem than we have.
And they don't have choice.
Doesn't matter. That's true, but it's not relevant to this point.
People that pass on.
So okay. So when a soul passes away, they gain awareness. So when you say that a person goes to, everybody always uses those expressions, right? They're in the better place now. They're in a better place now. I don't know. Did you go check this place yourself to ensure that it's a better place, or is it just the marketing? You know, it's like, have you ever read those ads for holiday accommodation? You know, they use all this flowery language, quaint, which basically means tiny, rustic, means the doors don't close, you know, like that kind of thing. You know, airy means there's holes in the ceiling, you know, like that kind of thing. So
do you gain awareness or lose the tether to the
okay, good point. So they go together, because the reality of any experience is the more plugged in you are to a single experience, the more blocked you are to a different experience. What does that mean practically? So I'll just use an example that actually came up in the other Tanya share that we have, the women's Tanya share. So it came up in the conversation yesterday. When a person goes to a cinema and then the movie ends and they leave the cinema, they're surprised to find that it's actually light outside. Right? It's a real phenomenon. Even though you know, conceptually, rationally, you know that it's still daytime, you're still surprised to walk outside and it's light. Why? Because when you're plugged into one reality, it blocks you being aware of a different reality. Now, a far more extreme version of that is what they call, what do they call it? ICU delirium. That's what they call it. ICU delirium. Where a person is in an ICU ward for an extended period of time, they start to lose their mind to a certain extent because all the normal things that regulate the body, the awareness of the passage of time, don't happen there, right? Because it's all artificial light. There's no sense of what's going on outside. People start to go a little bit mashuga. You're plugged into one reality, so you cannot experience another. As long as we're very invested in the physical experience, which is what happens when a soul inhabits a body, that blocks us from a higher awareness. Once the body is freed once the soul is freed from the body, then it allows the opportunity to plug into higher awareness. So the two go hand in hand. Now here's the thing. Those degrees of awareness, that's my experience of different layers of reality. In other words, let's say this. It's a very rudimentary example, but it will illustrate the point. If you, for example, have a phone, as we all do, and your phone can do these amazing things. I love it when people say things like, I don't know how my phone did that. Right? My phone just, as if it's autonomous, you know, my phone just did whatever.
Mine doesn't.
So my phone can do various things. I can do amazing things. You can make phone calls, you can send messages, you can set an alarm, you can watch videos. There are various things you can do on your phone. Now, I'm pretty convinced, and I'm sure Ron will agree, that the vast majority of people use only a small percentage of the capacity of what the device, whether it be the phone or the computer or whatever, they use a very small percentage of what the capacity of that device is. And then within the device, the particular apps that you're using, the average person uses only a very small range of what that app could potentially do. And probably one of the greatest examples of this is something called Excel, where you have people who are so pleased that they have Excel because they can put a shopping list. They're absolutely clueless to the power of what this thing can do. That's what it means to have greater or less awareness. There are layers of reality. There's a reality that we have. The reality we have is a table is a table, the light is a light, people are people. That's one layer of reality. There are higher layers or deeper layers of reality where we see that everything is made out of molecules. There's a deeper level of reality where everything is made out of divine energy. There's a deeper level of reality where everything is Hashem. So the question is, the awareness of what layer of reality is very different and has a very different impact. So when we live in our current reality, so we're tuned into this station called Earth. Most of our experiences live in this reality. One day the neshama is going to go somewhere else and leave most of our life behind. That's probably one of the great fears that people have. What's going to happen to me? They don't mean what's going to happen to me. They mean what's going to happen to all the things I've done, all the memories I've created, all the relationships I've built. What's going to happen to all of that? All that's going to be left behind. And where am I going to go? What's going to happen? There are many activities that are designed, it's what we call mitzvahs. They are designed to generate a reality that is beyond the here and now, to generate a connection between us and Hashem that is far deeper than this experience. Now, one day the neshama goes to the next world, and then you actually unpack whatever it is that you've created. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about at what level, at what layer of existence are you operating when you do these things. That's what we're going to be talking about. When we say that Hashem links the so-called positive thought, the tavuna, the awareness, to the maisa, to the action, that's actually what we're going to be talking about. So right now, that's probably sounding a little bit confusing. So once we read it and we start to unpack it, it will start to make more sense. So like I said, if you're in the book, it's on page 74, lines on the bottom. And on the screen, it is right at the bottom of the page that's currently on the screen. And the word is Elah. Elah, ha'inyan. So to better understand this idea of how Hashem links the so-called low-level contemplation that I had with the action that I'm going to do, to add value to that action, because the first thing we have to understand is that there are two possibilities of how we experience dechilu v'rachimu. Now those are Aramaic words. They're Aramaic words. Dechilu is fear of God. Rachimu is love of God. So dechilu v'rachimu should be hisgalus liboy. The first kind of love or fear, and fear is a bad word, but I'm just using it because it's easier to relate to. A much better word would be awe of God. So they can exist bihisgalus liboy, in a way that is revealed in a person's heart. Now let's translate that into plain English. What do you think we mean when we say that something is revealed, that an emotion is revealed in a person's heart? What do you think that means in plain English?
An emotion, I don't know.
Okay, but what does it mean? It's revealed in a person's heart.
He feels it.
You feel it.
Feel it.
That's what I mean. You feel it. I always think of that scene. Not that I grew up with grandparents who used to play the LP record of Fiddler on the Roof. So in Fiddler on the Roof, there's that moment where I don't remember who says it to who. If it's him to her, Tevye and his wife. If he asks her, she asks him, "Do you love me?" Right?
She asks him.
She asks him, right? And then he sings the whole song
It's a
about,
woman's question.
right? Do you love me? And he said, like the whole response, "I've done this for 25 years," and blah, blah, whatever. It's a very insightful little piece of theater, because when a person has to ask, "Do you love me?" does that mean the other person doesn't love them? That's why they had to ask? No. It means that the other person is not showing the love that they quite likely feel. So it is possible to have an emotion without experiencing that emotion. And it is possible to have an emotion that you don't experience, and therefore others are not aware of the fact that you have that emotion. It's very easy to relate to. And it applies to every single emotion. Let's say that somebody is very anxious to go to the dentist. So what do we do to them before they go to the dentist? We try and distract them. Because if they're thinking about something else, then they don't feel the anxiety. It doesn't mean they are no longer anxious. They are anxious, but we've succeeded in distracting them so they don't feel the anxiety.
They don't give it energy.
Right. They don't experience it. They don't experience the anxiety. Here's another example. You had to ask somebody, do you love your children? Of course I love my children. So how come you're here? Not only how come are you here? So while you're here, up until I asked that question, were you feeling love for your children? No, you were listening to the shir. It is possible to have an emotion without that emotion being bihizgalus liboy, being experienced and felt in your heart. Doesn't mean it's absent. And it's a terrible mistake that people make because you cannot feel all of your emotions all of the time. And yet they could still be your emotions. So if a person has love of Hashem behizgalus liboy, in a way that is felt, they're going to behave in a very unique way. Like anybody else, any person who's in love behaves in a very unique way. And if the love that the person has is towards Hashem, then they're going to behave in the context of their Judaism in a very unique way. So, if I'm talking about the fear and love of Hashem in a revealed fashion in the heart, and then I take that incredible dynamic love towards Hashem. Let's just speak about love instead of trying always to accommodate both sides, right? So let's say that a person has this incredible love towards Hashem. That love then manifests into the mitzvah that the person is doing. Le hachayoisam, to give that mitzvah life. So now this is so relatable. It's completely relatable. Ask a child to clear the dishes off the table on Friday night. Right? Don't know if your kids are old enough yet for this. No, but Friday night there's usually more dishes and it's much more likely that everybody's sitting together. So there you go. So you ask your kids to clear off the dishes from the table. What do they say? It's not my turn, it's not my job, it's not fair. They've got a whole mea culpa over there, but it's not me. I don't have to do it. Why? Because they hate chores, as any healthy child will. They hate chores. So what happens? They work it out that and they've got this down to a fine art. About 5 minutes before it's time to clear off the table, they start dozing off. I'm so tired. I'm so tired. Can't move. Can I please be excused from the table? Can I lie on the couch? And then what happens? You bring out dessert. So after whoever's cleared off the plate, now you bring out dessert. You have the resurrection of the dead. So what happened? Were you tired or you weren't tired? Right? Were you tired or were you not tired? The fact is, now you've brought what I love. When I love something, I come to life. That's the human condition. If there's something that I'm not interested in, I don't love, even if I believe it's important, fact is I don't love it, I'll do it, but I'm not going to do it enthusiastically. Let's go back to the dentist. If the person going to the dentist does not have anxiety around the dentist, how many people do you know who say, I cannot wait, you won't believe, I managed to get a root canal next week? Right? How many people do you have, even if it's not a root canal, how many people do you have who say, I cannot wait to see the dentist? Doesn't happen. I got to do it. It's something you got to do. It's a grudge experience. You go along, whatever the case is, drag yourself in over there. But the minute there's something that you love, you come to life. You're a different human. You're energetic. You're alive. You're focused. So therefore, coming back to the Beinoni could and ideally is a person who has this deep contemplation about Hashem's greatness and about the value of a mitzvah and how a mitzvah creates this bond between us and Hashem, and therefore, as a result of that, has ahava behizgalus liboy, has a real feeling of love towards Hashem. Then this Beinoni has to do a mitzvah. Give tzedakah, put on tefillin, daven in the morning, learn some Torah, whatever the case is. It's a love experience. And if it's a love experience, they are on fire. And what happens when you're on fire? That causes your mitzvah to fly upwards. Now, a little bit earlier in the chapter, we briefly spoke about the idea that you have to be able to give your mitzvahs wings. or even if you didn't read it inside, I spoke a little bit about it, right? Which is exactly what we're going to talk about. You want your mitzvah to fly upwards. You can't fly if you're not alive, if you're not motivated, if you're not excited. You can't fly. Now, what does it mean to fly upwards? What are we trying to do over here? Are we trying to send our mitzvahs? I don't know if you remember this. Back, maybe they still have it, to be perfectly honest. I just haven't been to the Gen for many, many, many decades. The General Hospital, Johannesburg General Hospital, used to have a system where, because it's such a big place, that if they needed to send reports or documents, or they had those, it was like this tube, right? They used to have a tube, and it was like air pressure, and they used to send it up. You send the thing up to the next floor, right?
No, I mean some of the clothing shops, Edgar's used to.
Okay, so there you go. So is that what we're doing with our mitzvahs? Is that what we're doing with our mitzvahs? We're trying to catapult our mitzvahs upwards. Is that what we're trying to do? Upwards where? What do you mean upwards? What are we trying to do? A mitzvah is a spiritual thing. You're trying to get your mitzvah to go upwards. Oh, a mitzvah is a holy thing. Spiritual is the wrong word. What if to elevate? How can you elevate? It's God's mitzvah. What do you mean elevate the mitzvah? How is that possible? It's very simple. It's very simple. You know, we use the experience in today's world. People will tell you about having an elevated dining experience. It's got nothing to do with going to the top building the top floor of the building. Elevated dining means I take the whole thing and I make it a different level of presentation, of quality, of experience. Why? Because I do it because I'm passionate. So if you want an elevated dining experience, you want a chef who's passionate about food, about elegant food. If you want an elevated mitzvah, the mitzvah is a mitzvah. Tefillin is tefillin. It doesn't matter who's putting on the tefillin. It doesn't matter how they feel putting on the tefillin. It is a mitzvah. It has the same value for every single person who puts on tefillin. But if you want an elevated experience, meaning if you want the experience of the mitzvah of tefillin to be plugged into a higher reality, a greater awareness of Hashem, for that you need love. You need passion. You need to be alive. You can't just be rolling into shul and before you know it, the tefillin are on your arm. But then he explains it even a little bit more anatomically. And this is where it gets really interesting. This explanation is really interesting because he tells us, because at the end of the day, your heart is a very materialistic organ, like any other limb of the body. Shehem klei hamaisa, and all other limbs of the body, they are the tools of action. The only thing is that the heart is a more vital part of the body, and it is the chayas. What's that?
Pnimi is from the word internal.
Correct.
Inside.
Correct. It doesn't mean that's more inside. All the organs are inside. Pnimi means that it's got a more vital role to play. The role that it plays is much more to the core of who a person is. So it is pnimi. It is a much more vital organ. V'chayus lohem, and it is the source of life for the rest of the body. Let's understand for a second what does he mean. What's the big chap in telling us that the heart is materialistic or physical? Chumri means more than physical. It means almost crass.
Almost like a chick.
What's he telling us? What's he telling us? So you ask specialists about the difference between a neurologist and a cardiologist. And depending on who you ask, you'll get either a defensive or a disparaging answer.
A neurologist for your head.
So if you ask a neurologist, they'll tell you a cardiologist is a glorified plumber. And a neurologist is an engineer. Why? Because if you had to compare the two organs, a brain and a heart, they are very, very different organs. Even though both of them are vital to human survival. And for many, many people, we see the heart as the representation of life because the pulse indicates that a person is alive or not. At the end of the day, as vital as it is to human survival, you cannot compare a heart to a brain because a heart is just a pump. It's a muscle. That's all it is. All it needs is to keep pumping. If that stops, take it out, put in another one. And you may not even put in another one. You may even put in a fake one. Right? You can put a synthetic heart. You can put a synthetic heart in. Why? Because it is just a muscle. A brain is a supercomputer. You can't swap out a brain. If you ask a neurologist, they will tell you, any decent neurologist, and this is, I can tell you from speaking to neurologists, any decent neurologist will tell you up front that we don't understand the brain. So in our limited knowledge of the brain, this is what we can do, and that's what we can do. A cardiologist is not going to say we don't understand the heart. We know exactly how the heart works. We know exactly where the valves belong. We know exactly what the chambers of the heart are. We know exactly when it's pumping, when it's resting. We know exactly what, etc., etc. The brain is so finicky. It's so complex. It's so mysterious that every couple of years they find something about the brain that nobody ever realized before. So if you had to look at the human, you could say that a human being is obviously a physical creature. That's without a question. We're physical creatures. And at the same time, a human being has a soul, which obviously is not physical. Now, any time that you have two very different technologies that have to cooperate, there has to be an interface that allows that cooperation. So there's got to be a place within the human that is beyond the normal physical, so that there can be a point of contact to the soul, which is not physical. Does that make sense? Let me explain to you what I mean. Explain what I mean. Let's say that you've got a teacher and a student. Now, by nature, by the definition of their roles, the teacher obviously has a lot more knowledge than the student. That's why the teacher's the teacher and the student's the student. If they don't have an interface, if they don't have a point of contact, the teacher can sit there till they are blue in the face and the student will learn nothing. There has to be an overlap. There has to be a connection. If you don't create that connection, there is no interaction. So however you create that connection is not for the purpose of this conversation. But in the same way, there has to be a point of contact. There has to be a part of the human that does not behave in a classical physical way, so that we've got a point of contact for the soul that is not physical. Which part of us is not fully physical? The brain. As we know this. We know that the brain it's got electrical circuitry. We know that the brain, again, we don't know how memory works. We don't understand it. We don't know where memory is stored. We have these weird stories where people have to have operations where they have to remove sections of the brain and then other functions start to work again, even though they shouldn't have. We don't understand the brain. It's not held in the normal physical experiences that we're used to. The heart, chumri, it's completely mechanical. That's all there is to it.
So how can we say the heart feels? Now I'm very confused.
Just because people say things doesn't mean they're accurate, right? The heart is designed to react to stimuli. So if a person is excited or afraid, the heart rate goes up because the function of the heart is to provide more blood to the brain to be able to deal with the fight-flight response. But the heart is not feeling anything. The heart is purely responding. Right? Otherwise, by the same argument, you could say if a person gets goosebumps, you could say, my skin feels. It's a reaction. So what is the heart? The heart is chumri. It is purely physical. It's just a muscle. It's just mechanical. Therefore, the heart has a relationship with the other purely physical parts of the body in a way that even the brain doesn't. So if I can get my heart stimulated, it will affect the whole body. If I can raise the heart rate, then a person's going to be more energized. If I slow the heart rate, a person will be more relaxed. So if I have a feeling, behisgalus liboy, and that feeling is so intense, is so tangible, that I can actually feel it in my heart. So again, my heart is not feeling. I'm feeling the love in my heart. How am I feeling in my heart? I have an elevated heart rate. That tells you my heart is feeling the sentiment of what's going on inside of me. If I have an elevated heart rate, that is going to affect the rest of the body. There will be blood coursing through my veins. The body is going to be alive. And then I'm going to get out there and do what I have to do in an elevated state. So when there's ahava b'hisgalus liboy, when a person has love and that love becomes so real that it's experienced in their heart, that person's experience will translate into a mitzvah that's at a whole different level of mitzvah. It's an elevated experience of mitzvah. And therefore, in the case of a person who is so spiritually advanced that they feel this love of Hashem, that love becomes the wings to lift their actions. In simple language, this person is in love with Hashem, therefore this person's mitzvahs are at a far greater level of divine reality than our mitzvahs. Because when we do mitzvahs, we just do the thing. We don't necessarily feel the meaning of what we're doing. Here we're talking about somebody who not only feels the meaning, but they feel the passion for the meaning of what they're doing. That's a much more elevated experience of the mitzvah. All of that is, that's not even what we're talking about here. We're not even talking about your experience. We're talking about what happens to the mitzvah. The mitzvah is a different experience of mitzvah. Not just I have an experience. The mitzvah is an elevated mitzvah. The mitzvah was done with passion. Therefore, the mitzvah is able to, as we'll see a little bit later in the chapter, is able to enter a higher sphere of awareness or a higher sphere of connection to Hashem because this mitzvah has been driven by passion. Now, all of this is by way of introduction to what we really need to speak about in this chapter, which is, this chapter is about the person who does not have that experience. The person who's not driven by this incredible love of Hashem. And yet they're going ahead and doing their mitzvahs. So therefore he continues, everything we've discussed in this chapter, which is where a person has love and fear of Hashem, not based on a conscious awareness, a feeling, a clarity about Hashem's greatness. It's just about an acknowledgement. Yes, this is the correct thing to do. This is really important. The soul needs mitzvahs. Mitzvahs are valuable. Having a relationship with Hashem is the ultimate. All of those concepts, which we've discussed before, are tevuna. It's like, I get it. I click. I acknowledge it. I accept it. This is a truth. Even if I don't feel it, it's correct. Going back to the example of the person who realizes that there's value in buying flowers for your wife, even if they don't feel the value of flowers. At least they have the tefuna, they have the appreciation. This is something worthwhile. And therefore, because it's worthwhile, therefore I'm going to do it. But how do they then have this elevated experience? This is somebody whose entire relationship with Hashem and with their mitzvahs lives in their brain, not in their heart. I'm not feeling it, I'm knowing it. And the distance from a thought in the heart, in the brain, to impacting the level of what you do is too great a distance for the average person to bridge. Again, I know I have to go to the dentist, so I go. But there's no investment, there's no passion, there's no enthusiasm. It just happens. So in the same way, the person who has this tefuna says, I know that it's valuable to do a mitzvah. It's really important. I learned about that. I thought about it. I acknowledge it. Therefore, I do it. But there's nothing to pump it with this incredible sense of enthusiasm. Therefore, there is no way to have that conceptual dedication translate into energy. To elevate my experience of doing the mitzvah. To get my mitzvah, so to speak, to fly upwards. It's just not possible. Because it's a theory. It's an idea. It's a concept. Or it's an acceptance. It's a commitment. None of those things generate enthusiasm. Commitment generates compliance. Passion generates enthusiasm. But the reality is, we started off this chapter by saying, not everybody can get to that point of this overwhelming love towards Hashem, and therefore their responsibility is to at least do the very least which they can namely to think about Hashem, to think about His greatness, to think about the value of the mitzvah, and to say, I get it. I'm on board for this, at least intellectually. So why should this person lose out on an elevated experience of Judaism just because they are not equipped with the ability that another Beinoni is equipped with? Just because they find it difficult to focus, or they find it that they're unable to develop this highly evolved version of experiencing Hashem. So for that, they should lose out. Therefore, he says, Im loy shehakadosh baruch hu mitzarfon umechabron lebechinas hamaiseh. Therefore, Hashem steps in and says, I'm going to take your tfuna, your awareness, your thought, and I'm going to hitch it onto the action you're now doing so that your action has the value that it would have had if you were that passionate. It's not your passion that's elevating your mitzvah. It's Hashem now elevating your mitzvah. Almost, you could say, as a reward for the fact that you tried your best, that you did what was within your capacity to do, which is a very powerful message for us, because very often people think, well, if I'm not as good as I should be, or if I'm not as good as the next person, then maybe my spirituality is unworthy, etc. So this illustrates that's not the case. As long as a person is investing and doing their very best and has reached the point where they acknowledge that to have awareness of Hashem and Hashem's greatness and the value of a mitzvah is what I need to focus on, Hashem will help that person to, for lack of a better term, to cross the finish line, to elevate their mitzvah experience. Now, he still has to explain this a little bit further in terms of the map, where this goes, what it does for us, why the expression is machshava tova, why we call it a good thought. So there's a few other things that we're unpacking with that. We'll be able to, please God, conclude the chapter either next time or the time after.